much is $1 worth? It's not a question you often ask yourself because most people would say $1 is worth $1. Maybe the dollar in your wallet is not as valuable as you think. The value of currency changes over time, and we ought to educate ourselves about debt-based currency and consider true forms of money. I've gathered some expert opinions about the topic of money, some going back as far as 1913, when everything in American monetary policy changed. Here today, you will have the opportunity to consider how debt currency causes inflation, how legal tender causes controversy, and how real money is only found in gold. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York recently released a press release titled, "Credit card and auto loan delinquencies continue rising." They found that the total household debt had increased in the fourth quarter of 2023 by $212 billion. So at the end of 2023, total household debt in America was $17.5 trillion. Okay, let's rewind. This demand pull inflation really kicked off in 2020 with some stimulus checks. And yeah, it's been going on for a while and prices rise. And then consumers anticipate rising prices, so it spurs more immediate spending and more immediate borrowing. So then the inflation continued. Now those loans that they borrowed are going delinquent and even defaulting. Why is this inflation happening though? Dollars are a form of debt currency. Debt currency is backed by loans from banks, so they leave a fraction in reserve and loan out the rest. And when banks lend to one another, the money supply virtually increases. Here you'll see only $100 is deposited and more than $100 is loaned out. These banks profit from the interest paid on the loans that they issue. So some presidents have tried to get the U.S. government to profit from this same debt currency system. Abraham Lincoln, for example, passed the National Bank Act. He printed greenbacks and then was assassinated. President James Garfield, he refinanced the national debt so that he wouldn't have to pay the bankers so much. He was assassinated. President William McKinley, he kept the U.S. on the gold standard, and he resisted the private banks' attempts to make silver coins minted in their banks rather than going through the U.S. Well, William McKinley was assassinated. President John F. Kennedy instructed the Treasury to print $4 billion worth of $2 and $5 bills and issued them free of debt, free of interest. But then the difference between creating the money and having that silver in reserve was all profit for the U.S. government. Well, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. All 4 presidential assassinations in the United States are directly related to them messing with the monetary status quo. How did we get here where our currency is controlled by private interests? Well, 112 years ago, a U.S. government committee asked a bunch of private bankers, "What are you guys doing? You guys seem to have a lot of control." The banker said, "We don't have more power than anybody else." But their official statement, this committee's official statement, was that there were a few leaders of finance who disproportionately control the money and credit in the United States. So then Senate and Congress had a big hullabaloo. And in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. The Federal Reserve System is a system of 12 private banks who are controlled by a government-chosen board of directors. So yeah, the government chooses some people to oversee these banks, but it's still 12 private institutions. So the word federal doesn't make the Federal Reserve federal. It's private. It's private banks profiting privately off of the money in the United States. Okay, well, after this act was passed, only 18 out of 7,493 banks wanted to be banks anymore. And there are laws that require legal tender be Federal Reserve notes. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. A Federal Reserve note. Our money used to be backed by silver. It had inherent value. The Federal Reserve note that I hold in my hand today, compared to one from 1913, is worth 3%. So the dollar has depreciated so much, but it's still called $1. Did anything hold value over the last 100 years? Gold. A revolver in 1899 was $13. We account for inflation, that's about $500 for a revolver. Today, a $500 revolver is plentiful. You can buy it anywhere. The US gold coin used to be $20 face value. Now, that same ounce of gold is worth over $2,000. The dollar lost its value, but gold increased in value. J.P. Morgan famously said, money is gold and nothing else. I mean, gold has been used as money for over 5,000 years. It's mined from the ground. It's the only labor-intensive form of money. All Federal Reserve notes are just loans that are issued out, owed to somebody else. This money is going to be worthless in 100 years at this rate. Okay, now we know about the fundamental flaws of debt currency. We've explored the relation between debt and inflation, proving this system is actually quite unstable. We've examined the history of legal tender and the controversy of the Federal Reserve System. We've discussed the value of gold as money, a more secure alternative to debt currencies. How will we explain today to our grandchildren? Will we have to counsel them through an unstable economy? Or will we tell them that in 2024, we had our eyes opened and we started researching and now we understood and then changes were made. And that's why they enjoy a prosperous economy. Let's take the first step towards financial sovereignty and economic resilience by educating ourselves and making informed decisions about the money we trust and the future we wish to build. J.P. Morgan said, money is gold and nothing else.